Sports closing out this 3 o'clock hour. Grayson Grundhoefer, football analyst. He does more than football, but football analyst and recruiting as well. Can talk men's basketball with the best of them, too. Joins us on 365 Sports. Grayson, so they had that weekend where they had 3 players that they got in the transfer portal. Then they got Thomason. How many more spots are available, or is that kind of a chess match right now and matching up what they have available with what they want?
Yeah, guys, I mean, right now it's definitely still a little bit of a chess match. I think Baylor's still trying to work out, not just how many spots they have, but also where to utilize those spots. So right now, I think if you're kind of predicting it, if you're kind of just trying to put a number on it, I would put the number at most at 3. And I kind of, 3 has been the number that I've been working with for a while now, since they got Thomason. And I still believe at least one of those spots will be used on the offensive line, if not 2 of them. And then from there, it just becomes, what kind of best available prospect would they want to take, whether it's a defensive back or a wide receiver, just truly a best available at any position. I could see them doing that as well. But I think that's kind of what I guess people should be expecting at the moment, is maybe 3 with still a clear emphasis on the offensive line.
Grayson, have they? I know that they reached out to a lineman in the portal this week, or that's he might be taking a visit. Who was that, and who might they also be looking at on the front?
Right. So South Carolina offensive lineman Sidney Fugar, he's actually taking an official visit on Monday. So that's kind of the biggest, latest news that I guess has come up over the past week or so. So he'll take an official visit. He's already been to Colorado and UCLA as well. So a lot of competition for him. He played at Western Illinois before transferring to South Carolina, and pretty much exclusively played guard. Has played tackle at both of his stops. At Western Illinois, it was left tackle. At South Carolina, it was left tackle at the beginning of the year, but he struggled. So they moved him to right tackle, and he played a little bit better. But still a guy that you're kind of hoping hits his upside. I don't think he's played his best football of his career yet, but I do think that his best football is ahead of him. He's about 6'5", 325 pounds, but what I find to be the most interesting thing really about him is that, Colton Thomason right now, the thought is he'll start at tackle, but Fugar is also a tackle, at least he has been throughout his career. So it's a little interesting to me that Baylor would kind of heavily rely on 2 guys playing tackle when kind of my initial thought was they would at least want a starting guard or 2 there. So I still think there's some moving parts there. Maybe one of those guys ends up being a guard in the near future. But yeah, Sidney Fugar, that's kind of the biggest name that has popped up. He would also have 2 years of eligibility for those who are interested in kind of the timeline there.
What holes do you see defensively still out there? Defensive line is. I know you mentioned Jack quite a bit. The star position. What levels are you still concerned about defensively? Because I think obviously the lines on both sides are the number one. I think target for this team. But beyond that, on that side, especially with Aranda taking over.
It's interesting because I think for me, I have a few more concerns than I think the staff does. Because you kind of look at how they've been recruiting. They really haven't focused on the defensive side of the ball since they were able to land, the guys early in the portal period, Jacquez Evans, Linus Noel, and Lorando Johnson. They really haven't focused on that side of the ball much. And so for me, I think it's pretty clear offensive line is still the position that they're most, wanting to add at. And then I think beyond that, I think they could add a defensive lineman. I think that could make some sense. I think they could add a younger linebacker because, while they have a lot of guys on the roster there, I'm not sure that they hit on a lot of guys who are actually going to be extremely impactful in the future. I think they have some, but I think they could add another young guy there. I also think at safety, there's room to maybe add a young guy as well. So I see some positions that they could take some guys, but I also see the facts are, they don't have a lot of room. And I think for this team to be successful, they have to be better on the offensive line. And so because of that, they're really restricted in how much they're able to recruit other positions, specifically on defense. And I will say one more thing on the defensive side. They were really young a year ago, and I think they're truly counting on, them adding just a couple guys on the defensive side and then saying, hey, you know what, we're going to develop these young guys being really good, impactful players this next year. And we don't necessarily need to take a ton of transfers. And we'll see if that works. You know, you got to be able to develop guys if you're Baylor. And so we're going to be able to truly find out if they're able to do that, especially with Dave Aranda taking over on the defensive side of things.
We're getting into the portion of the semester where it's the semester's ending. I'm watching a lot of people around town starting to pack up, head back to the hometown or to wherever they're going for the summer. How surprised are you that as we get into the summer period that there's still not a starting quarterback named?
I think at this point, my hunch was honestly after the spring game, since they didn't announce someone, I kind of expected them to just let it drag out into fall camp.
Yeah.
Really. And so I kind of think that's what's happening. I think it'd be very weird if you just came out with a graphic, at the start of June or whatever, naming a starting quarterback. So I think it just kind of tells me that, Sora Robertson and Daquan Finn have done enough that, maybe both of them deserve a chance to win the job in the fall. And I think some people would have said that maybe Baylor should have done that in 2022 with Gary Bohannon and Blake Shapen, and they decide not to. So maybe it's a little bit of an adjustment there and just saying, hey, you know what? We're going to go into the fall. We're going to let these guys continue to compete. We got a new offense coming in, so let's try to see kind of how these guys grow and adjust over the summer and then go from there. So I would say after the spring, since they didn't name one after the spring game, it's not really surprising to me. But I would have told you that I would have been shocked, before spring ball. I would have been stunned if they didn't name one by the end of it, but we're already past that point now.
Grayson, one of the most, digested and dissected comments from Dave Aranda from last season might have been when I asked him, do you think you have Big 12 championship caliber roster? And he said, yes, he did. And it was obviously they did not. And he was trying to maybe believe in the players that he had. Do you feel like this roster, based on what they have added, who they have coming in from high school, and what they have coming back that's a year older, is closer to that or not?
They are definitely closer than they were a year ago. And I mean, just to be honest with that statement by Dave Aranda, I think we all pretty much got that vibe from the entire staff last year that they felt like their team was far more talented than they ended up being. And I just think it was plain and simple, just kind of a misevaluation of talent, honestly. And so you kind of saw that as the season went on. They just simply were not talented in multiple games last year where they got blown out. I think you look at this year, the emphasis on the transfer portal has been absolutely key. The fact that they've gone out and added some guys that are actually, really highly coveted from other schools and guys that, they're hoping to actually hit on these evaluations. And then I also think, the young guys on the roster that I think they were expecting to make a jump, I think now, you see them in year 2 or year 3. I think it maybe is a little bit more realistic that jump actually happens. And so I think in general, they're in a much better situation. I think that there's a belief there that they're in a better situation. I think what they've done in the transfer portal really, I think is going to solidify those things. And we can talk about scheme and all of that, those changes as well, which I do think will help. But I think they're at a point now where they go into almost every game this season and they're going to expect to at least be in it. But to be honest, guys, in the Big 12, this happens every year. The margin is razor thin. And so even if you have the talent to compete, it's those little things that have to go your way if you're truly going to be a team that, goes from 3 wins to 8 wins. They're going to have to hit on some of those margin things. But I do think their roster is good enough for them to be pretty confident that they can make a bowl game if they, develop and if they're coached the way they're going to need to be going into the season.
Grayson, any news on the basketball front?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked last week, and they were able to land Norchan Omir, which was huge. Landing one of the best transfer portal guys. I mean, that guy's a difference maker. I mean, the things that he can do from a rebounding standpoint, a physicality standpoint, an athleticism standpoint, he's just an absolutely awesome culture fit and a guy that's going to fit right in. And he and Jeremy Roach being additions are really going to round out that roster nicely. I will say they probably have 2 more spots available. I think the pretty obvious consensus is they're going to take a backup center of some kind. Maybe not someone that's going to play a ton, but someone that they believe can be, a role player for them. And then, of course, I do think they're also going to take another 4, a guy that's kind of more like a Jalen Bridges type, a guy that can shoot the basketball, but is closer to 6'6", 6'7", who you can count on to play, major minutes, whether that is starting next to Norchan O'Meara, or whether that's coming off the bench for O'Meara when he slides to the 5. I think they desperately need someone like that, and I think over the next week, I think they're going to end up finding a guy like that.
Grayson, this is just from part of the conversations with college football about if whatever the future might be at some point, if there's a breakaway. How many teams do you think would be in any kind of an upper echelon level of the Autonomy 4?
So if you're saying there's only 2 leagues,
no, well,
is that kind of what you're hinting at?
Or just whatever that number might be, whether it's 2 conferences or 1 or 5 or whatever.
Okay.
How many teams do you feel like is a legitimate number of who should be included?
I think 60 is the number. That's the number that I think that would be probably. I think that would probably be the high end of the number as well. But I do think that, when people start saying 48 or 40 or 36, that is too few schools. But if you get to 60, I think you can start making a pretty reasonable argument for certain schools being in it, certain schools not being in it. But I think 60, and that would essentially be three conferences with 20, or you get to the NFL model where, there's 2 conferences of 30 or 32 teams, and then you have your 60, 64 teams, then work it out from there. But I think that's kind of the number range that I would be looking at.
All right, thank you very much, Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com, 365 Sports Football and recruiting analyst. He's all over it. The different. I can't keep up with it. Don't want to keep up with it, and even now more than ever before. You used to always worry about but focus on the high school players entering or coming to official visits or not. And now you have to add it in the transfer portal, which is a different animal completely. When we